packages, rising debt levels severely limit countries' ability to provide essential public services such as healthcare and social protections. We must move swiftly on debt and concessional finance to support the most vulnerable people we serve. To minimize real risks of rising debt levels, we need political will and steadfast international cooperation, and I call on all member states to help ensure crucial liquidity for many developing countries. I welcome the debt service suspension initiative supported by G20. I trust that today's event will catalyze further action towards all 7 action areas of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. To build resilience for the poorest and most vulnerable people, we must ensure sufficient financing. This is a global pandemic, and as such, our response must be global, comprehensive, and well-coordinated. South-South finance is critical to progress. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, has suggested that liquidity reserves of some southern countries can support the balance of payment crisis facing small and medium-sized economies. It has also undermined the importance of inter-South trade. As the global economy reboots, the Global South must forge a more ambitious path to ensure that we build back better. In order to safeguard the future, we must work in a sustainable manner, addressing structural problems in global and national economies and investing in human capital. We must act now to strengthen healthcare systems in line with the landmark political declaration on universal health coverage adopted during the high-level of the 24th session of the General Assembly. By galvanizing multilateral action, we can pool our resources to advance scientific research on disease control. To build back better, we must ensure affordable and equitable access to vaccines, treatment, and medical supplies. Furthermore, I urge member states and UN entities to leverage South-South and triangular cooperation to bridge the digital divide and ensure universal access to global public goods and services such as telemedicine and remote learning. Excellencies, as we mark the annual South-South Day, I encourage member states to continue to support the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation and its initiatives. South-South and triangular cooperation will be critical as we begin the decade of action and deliberate to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. In 2015, we pledged to leave no one behind. We cannot renege on that promise at a time of crisis. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your remarks and also for your support to South-South cooperation as you organize an event with the General Assembly on South-South cooperation on food security. So thank you again for your words and also thank you for your commitment and support. Now it is my honor to give the floor to Mr. Achim Steiner, Administrator of UNDP and also Secretary General of the BAPA Plus 40 Conference. Mr. Administrator, the floor is yours, and you are going to deliver the message from the United Nations Secretary General.
Thank you, Jorge. Dear President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Jorge, you take us back to a very fond moment, BAPA Plus 40, Buenos Aires, another time, another era in some sense of where the world was. And yet here we are in the year 2020, and in today's celebration of South-South cooperation, I think lies also the resilience of not only the idea, the partnership that we are celebrating today, but also the centrality of the United Nations in hopefully being able to continue to be a conduit, a catalyst, a connector of the ideas that have both shaped the South-South cooperation agenda, and that was so clearly and so articulately refocused through the BAPA Plus 40 preparatory process and what happened in Buenos Aires. But let me take up where Jorge introduced me. I have the honor of reading out the remarks of the Secretary General to you this morning, and I thank him and thank you for the opportunity to do so. So here is his statement for today's occasion. Dear Excellencies, colleagues, the COVID-19 pandemic is devastating lives and livelihoods around the world. It poses the greatest risks to developing countries and to vulnerable people and communities. As we mark this year's United Nations Day for South-South cooperation, we are highlighting the power of the Global South to support and advance sustainable development even during these challenging times. Southern countries are demonstrating the spirit of South-South cooperation, equal partnership, and global solidarity during the pandemic by collaborating in science, technology, and innovation, delivering medical supplies, providing financial resources, sending health workers and experts to bridge gaps in capacity, and sharing best practices. South-South and triangular cooperation must also have a central place in our preparations for a strong recovery. They can never replace official development assistance or the responsibilities of the Global North set out in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda and the Paris Agreement. But we will need the full contributions and cooperation of the Global South to build more resilient economies and societies and to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. The United Nations is playing its part in supporting South-South and triangular cooperation through the pandemic by fast-tracking financial allocations for developing countries as they cooperate with each other and with development banks and agencies. As we look beyond the immediate crisis, the United Nations will continue to stand with the Global South. Let us coordinate our efforts to scale up Southern development successes, share them widely through enhanced cooperation, build a strong recovery, and achieve the SDGs by 2030. This is the Secretary General's statement. And if you allow me, Excellencies, just a remark in terms of UNDP and in my capacity as administrator. Some of you, because we have come together to celebrate these occasions, have heard me say before that South-South cooperation has become part of the DNA of UNDP. In fact, much of our work in this pandemic has yet again demonstrated that the frontier of solutions, of developing new approaches, responses, is very much lying in connecting where the frontier of innovation is across the Global South, just as much as it continues to draw on triangular cooperation approaches. And I want to thank also the Office of South-South Cooperation, my dear colleague Jorge Cedic, for the work, the leadership that the team has brought, the financing that you as active partners in South-South cooperation have enabled the UN Fund and the UN Fund for South-South cooperation to provide. I will not go into examples, you know them, but my message today simply is, I was convinced out of Buenos Aires and BAPA+40 that not only in the reality of how development is evolving across our countries and particularly in the Global South, is the idea of South-South cooperation not something that was born in another age. It is indeed evolving with the age, but it is also a central part of where the United Nations can be that great global connector, and where we in UNDP are proud to host the office. We are proud to be part of a fabric of knowledge and networks of South-South cooperation, and we believe in some ways we are part of this big idea that has shaped the discussions here in New York, but increasingly also in the reality of development investments, whether it is infrastructure, institutional capacity, poverty reduction, social protection, transitions towards greener economies. These form part of the frontier of development that is today being shaped by South-South cooperation. So a happy day. I wish you all. It's a great pleasure to see so many leading partners and faces today on the screen. And with that, I hand back to Jorge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Administrator, for your message. And also I want to really make a special point of thanking you personally and the colleagues of UNDP for your strong commitment and support to the office and support to our work in promoting more and better South-South cooperation. I really want to make that point very strong. Thank you again, Mr. Administrator. Now it is my honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Munir Akram, Permanent Representative of Pakistan and President of the Economic and Social Council. Mr. Akram, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Director. Thank you for inviting me to this celebration of South-South Day. I would also like to thank the distinguished President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Tijane, for his statement, as well as to welcome the remarks that have been conveyed by the Administrator of the UNDP on behalf of the Secretary General and himself. Mr. Director, the importance of South-South cooperation is now more evident than ever, as Mr. Steiner has said. Our leaders came together 40 years ago to conceive this idea of mutual cooperation in the first conference on technical cooperation among developing countries. The BAPA plus 40 outcome is a reflection of the evolution and development in the scope of our cooperation. Today, we are at another inflection point in the evolution of the world economy and the evolution of South-South cooperation. We must welcome the fact that in this interim of 48 plus years, South-South trade has expanded exponentially. Mutual investments between the southern countries have likewise escalated to a level that is almost equal to that of the developed northern countries in the developing countries. And we have constructed institutions of cooperation across the world, and we should take pride in the fact of the institutions such as the ASEAN that has promoted South-South cooperation to an unprecedented level and provides an example for many of us in the various regions of the world. We have created the AAIB, the Infrastructure Investment Bank, and likewise there are new organizations that are presently on the anvil in South-South cooperation. We see that for the future, the achievement of the SDGs is unlikely without the contribution of the developing countries and without South-South cooperation among developing countries. The greatest potential for production and manufacturing still resides with the developing countries. Projects are more profitable in developing countries. We have the largest segment of the world's population in terms of both consumption and production, and therefore the greatest potential. Trade is also a latent device in which we can promote our economies through South-South trade, and that potential can be escalated through agreements, free trade agreements, and agreements at the WTO. There is the dimension of physical connectivity, which is providing the greatest and fastest impetus to the growth and investment in the developing countries. We are, as I said, Mr. Director, at an inflection point with the COVID crisis and combined with the challenge of the SDGs and the challenge of climate change. These are triple challenges that we face today. And in addressing those challenges, I believe that South-South cooperation, apart from the projects which have been so ably directed by the center, we must also focus on some policy issues. These are critical for our future. Policy issues in three areas. Finance. We see that today the developed countries have issued fiscal deficits to the tune of $11 trillion to finance their recovery from COVID. The developing countries are struggling to find that reserve and that money in order to be able to spend on their recovery. So there is an inequality, and I believe that in finance, we need to find ways in which we can utilize our reserve currencies and to build on the basis of the reserves that we have in order to enable South-South cooperation and help to each other. Secondly, the key to the SDGs, in my view, is infrastructure investment. And this is an area in which we need to find ways to focus and to develop our institutions of cooperation and investment in infrastructure. And third, is the area of science and technology. Science and technology, we need to align the intellectual property regime of the world with the SDGs. And I think the vaccine is the first step in this direction, that we must make a common good for all mankind. Secondly, we must target research and development to the objectives of the southern countries. Research so far has focused on the priorities of the developed countries, not the developing countries. And we need to target what we want from research and development. And thirdly, we need to bridge the digital divide. This is the pathway to a transition to modern economies. And we have amongst us examples which can provide us the impetus for bridging the digital divide. Mr. Director, we have to utilize all the capabilities for us to work together, develop our cooperation, and to address the policy issues which are the key for us to transform our developing economies into modern economies and advanced countries. This is the priorities which I have focused on in my opening statement as the President of the Economic and Social Council, and I look to the cooperation of all my friends in the Group of 77 in China to promote these vital objectives for the southern countries. I thank you very much for this invitation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador and President of the Economic and Social Council, for your thoughtful contributions and for the commitment to utilize the institutional setup of the Council to advance South-South cooperation. Now it is my honor to give the floor to Mr. Adonia Ayebari. His Excellency has been a very prominent leader in South-South cooperation as current President of the High-Level Committee and co-facilitator of the BAPA Plus 40 preparatory process. So I really want to invite him to speak. And the floor is yours, Mr.
Ambassador. My brother Shadik and my friend, thank you very much for giving me the floor. And let me take this opportunity to really thank you for your service to the United Nations and to South-South cooperation. In fact, it's been a pleasure working with you. I've learned a lot from you. Your passion for South-South cooperation is really immeasurable. And as the President of the High-Level Committee, speaking on behalf of the High-Level Committee and member states, to really thank you for making our work easy by really facilitating us with all what we needed, both technically, intellectually, and we really, really are grateful on behalf of the Bureau. Mr. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Tijan Mohamed Bande, President of the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues. Let me also thank Akim for the remarks made on behalf of the Secretary General, but also for his role as the President of the BAPA Plus 40 Conference and also Administrator of UNDP, for his unwavering support of South-South cooperation. You are a really great supporter of South-South cooperation, and UNDP for a long time supported the Office of South-South Cooperation, and as the BAPA Plus 40 outcome document, member states decided that UNDP should be the institutional home of the South Cooperation Office, and we look forward to UNDP continue to supporting the office. And Akim, also thank you for reminding us of the good old days of the BAPA conference in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Indeed, it sounds like long ago when we were in another world before the COVID-19 crisis. And we look forward to those days when we could meet in person in conferences and take decisions in person. Your Excellencies, I'm honored to be here with you for the United Nations International Day for South-South Cooperation, where we will reflect on the importance of South-South and triangular cooperation for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the effective response to the global COVID-19 crisis and recovering better, especially in the Global South. This year marks the beginning of the decade of action and delivery for sustainable development. Sadly, the global COVID pandemic impacts are certain to go well beyond 2020 and putting our collective ambition of meaningful sustainable development to the test. Several assessments of the damage that COVID-19 will cause have been made in the Global South. According to the least bad projection, I'll give the African continent example, 122.8 million African people will suffer from the disease, 2.3 million admissions to the hospitals, and 300,000 deaths. On the African continent, between 5 and 29 million people could find themselves in extreme poverty, and 19 million jobs could be lost. The decisions we make now will determine how our global community will survive. The 2030 Agenda requires the strengthening of means of implementation for developing countries, particularly in the areas of financing, technology, and capacity building to conceive the agenda. Excellencies, as a co-facilitator of the outcome document of BAPA Plus 40, which was held in Argentina in March 2019, I have to underline that the conference was not simply about celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. It was much more. The conference provided us with a direction, and more importantly, with the future impulse for the South-South and triangular cooperation. The BAPA Plus 40 outcome document mentioned the importance of sub-regional, regional, and inter-regional organizations for the promotion of transparent, sustainable, and accountable development practices, and for enabling more partnerships with the view of promoting and scaling up best practices to benefit developing countries. In the challenging times we live in, it is encouraging to see increased cooperation among countries of the South at national and regional level, working across borders to share best practices for mitigating the spread and impact of COVID-19 and accelerating the recovery from it. More than ever, country-to-country learning had become not only timely, but also essential. However, some of the ongoing good integration initiatives in the South have been threatened by very measures that governments have taken in response to COVID-19, such as closing of borders and repositioning of trade and financial restrictions. Your Excellencies, given the threat posed by COVID-19 pandemic on the SDGs achievements in the developing countries, countries of the South are encouraged with the contribution of other partners, including countries of the North, international financial institutions, the private sector, support national collective efforts in the South to fight the pandemic and to address its adverse and socio-economic impacts. Your Excellencies, to leverage the role of South-South and triangular cooperation for sustainable development, the existence of national policies and strategies are critical elements to advancing Southern and triangular partnerships for achievements of SDGs. In this regard, countries of the South should be supported in their efforts to enhancing or building the human institutional capacities required to formulate and implement national development policies, strategies, and activities for South-South and triangular cooperation, and enhance their coordination mechanism. Your Excellencies, let me end by emphasizing that the post-COVID world will require more solidarity and cooperation to meet promise of 2030 agenda. Only together we can stand against global threats such as COVID-19. Only together we can fulfill the promise that we jointly made to leave no one behind. I thank you.
Thank you very much again for your leadership and also for your kind words, Ambassador Ayebare. You know, one of the big challenges we have on South-South cooperation is to show that it's really making a difference. There are people that are skeptical about it. So one of the jobs that we imposed to ourselves in the office is to document how South-South cooperation is really changing the world. So we decided to prepare every year a compilation of good practices of how these initiatives are going, and also to create mechanisms for further partners to join them. So this year we're launching the 3rd edition of our good practice in South-South and triangular cooperation for sustainable development. And this year we have identified 195 practices provided by many partners, governments from the South and also from the North, member states, intergovernmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, UN entities, and others. So the idea is to expand the base of knowledge and to deepen the partnerships in all the dimensions that Ambassador Akram mentioned: economic, social, technological, etc. So all these practices are available also in our South-South Galaxy, which is a platform that already has the participation of over 200 entities in the North, the South, and international organizations. And we look forward to building more of that knowledge base that will show what South-South cooperation is doing, and also to increase the scope of the activities that are going. I would like to introduce a very brief video of 2 minutes to show you what we mean by presenting this publication, which is already available in the UNOSCE portal and will be made available in the 6 official languages of the United Nations, as it was done in previous edition, and maybe even in Portuguese, as we did in previous edition, and to cover other countries, and especially some countries that are very close to my heart. So now please put the video. Thank you for the video. I understand many of you could not have access to the audio. We're going to post it in the web page, but I think the images by themselves provided enough information. So we regret that some of you, as I said, did not get the audio, but we'll make it available. Now it is my honor to request the participation of His Excellency Ambassador Neil Pierre, Ambassador of Guyana to the United Nations, and Chair of the Group of 77 and China. Mr. Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Director Chediak, for giving me the floor. His Excellency, Mr. Tijani Mohamed Bande, President of the General Assembly, His Excellency, Mr. Munir Akram, President of ECOSOC, Mr. Akim Steiner, speaking on behalf of the UN Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. At the outset, the group would like to extend its appreciation to the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation for organizing this important high-level commemoration of United Nations Day for South-South Cooperation. The current global crisis makes it difficult to be in a celebratory mode. However, it is important to take a moment of our time to commemorate the significant milestones and achievements that remind us how far we have come and where our efforts can take us. The 42nd anniversary of the 1978 adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action for promoting and implementing technical cooperation among developing countries is one such milestone. South-South cooperation is a manifestation of solidarity among peoples and countries of the global South. While noting that South-South cooperation is not a substitute for, but rather a complement to North-South cooperation, it is always driven by the demand, experiences, capabilities, best practices, and diversified cultures of developing countries and their individual and collective pursuit of sustained economic growth and sustainable development. Yet, the gains of our collective efforts in the global South are now compromised. 5 years after the adoption of the 2030 Agenda, decades of development gains have been undermined and in some cases reversed. The COVID-19 pandemic has now made the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals difficult for many countries. It has threatened multilateralism and the advancement of South-South cooperation. The impacts of the current pandemic and the efforts to contain it jeopardize the achievement of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs. We are facing exacerbated challenges and new vulnerabilities, prompting the need for urgent actions at all levels and by all stakeholders to achieve the SDGs. Our countries are comprehensively impacted in the medium and long term due to the fragility of our health systems, limited social protection coverage, and a widening digital divide and vulnerability to external shocks. This commemoration gives us an opportunity, therefore, to be reminded of the importance of South-South cooperation and to raise the awareness of the international community about its continued relevance. Furthermore, this will provide opportunities for countries of the global South to create spaces for sharing successful early policy measures and experiences in containing the spread of the pandemic and in mitigating its social and economic fallout. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the second high-level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation, we recognize the important role that South-South cooperation must play in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. South-South cooperation is an important contributor to poverty eradication in all its forms and dimensions, as it generates continued, inclusive, sustained, and equitable economic growth. It is responsive to the immediate challenges and evolving realities of global development and the unique needs of developing countries as we pursue our individual and collective goals. The group calls upon the United Nations Development System to continue enhancing its support to South-South and triangular cooperation at the request and with the ownership and leadership of developing countries. We acknowledge the significant work by the United Nations Office for South-South cooperation in this regard. The office has been crucial in building networks and increasing awareness across the UN system and among developing countries of the various forms and instances of South-South cooperation, helping our efforts to grow. As we celebrate South-South Cooperation Day, we look ahead with anticipation to the upcoming 20th session of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation on a date to be determined to review the follow-up to BAPA Plus 40. We will focus, among other things, on specific measures undertaken in response to COVID-19 through South-South and triangular cooperation at the global, regional, and national levels. We are at the start of the decade of action and delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as celebrating 75 years since the creation of the United Nations. The group views this as an important opportunity to reflect on the vital role of international solidarity and collaboration to support the delivery of the SDGs, while effectively responding to the global COVID-19 pandemic and recovering better, especially in the global South. Finally, moderator, the group would like to acknowledge the hard work that you have invested, Mr. Jorge Chediek, Envoy of the Secretary General on South-South Cooperation and Director, United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation. And we wish you well in your upcoming retirement on the 16th of September, 2020. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your message, Ambassador Pierre, and thank you also for the greeting, which I really appreciate very much, and I appreciate the very strong partnership of the office with the G77. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Fekitemolea Katoa Utoikamanu, a High Representative for Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island States. The floor is yours, Madam Secretary General.
Yeah, thank you. Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to join you for today's special session to commemorate the United Nations Day for South-South Cooperation. All people presently live a major global crisis since the founding of the United Nations. Over half a year has gone by where we all try to move forward in spite of the disrupting impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. People's lives have been upended and too many lives have been lost. The pandemic thrives on inequalities and has deepened inequalities even further. New divides have emerged. Socio-economic tensions have the potential to endanger hard-won peace and stability everywhere. Uncertainty continues to prevail, and we have yet to get a grip on what the medium to long-term socio-economic impacts of COVID-19 could look like. It is, though, already certain that vulnerable countries, such as the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, will be impacted disproportionately. Their intrinsic vulnerabilities to endogenous and external shocks have been amplified by multiple. Their lack of institutional capacity and financial resources to respond to multiple COVID-19 threats is likely to erode the development progress they could record in the past decade. LDCs experience significant economic slowdown brought by the collapse of the commodity prices, shrinking global demand, disruption in domestic production, and value chain systems. It is estimated that over 70 million additional people living in LDCs will be pushed into extreme poverty this year. Health concern-driven border closures and associated restrictive measures have inflicted devastating impacts on the landlocked developing countries. They rely heavily on cross-border trade for much-needed medical equipment and essential supplies. Losses in export earnings are projected to reach an estimated 37% this year. As far as the small island developing states are concerned, they're likely to experience a pronounced contraction in 2020 and beyond as a result of plummeting tourism revenues and remittance flows. The disruption of global supply chains, the near standstill tourism sector, and mounting debt burdens, and ever accelerating impact of climate change exact a disproportionately heavy toll on SIDS. To keep it short, the challenge lies in how we can find ways and means to ensure that the most vulnerable, women, elderly, children, and all those who fall between the cracks because they've lost crucial lifelines, to decent livelihoods, and because they have no adequate social protection, are not left behind. Ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 drives home to all of us as it knows no borders, no gender, no race, no religion. COVID-19 sends a message: we need solidarity, multilateral cooperation, and above all, the political will to turn what is a global challenge into a situation where we leave no one behind. It is now that countries need international support that must include support from the global south. Together, we must mobilize the resources needed to strengthen fragile health systems to cope with their emergency, and this must include focus on the vulnerable segments of the population. Let me be clear, strengthening health systems, strengthening public health is more than equipment, medicine, and the like. It is about nutrition, it's about safe drinking water, it's about clean air, it's about sanitation, it's about basic human rights that we can no longer deny to the most vulnerable. We must go beyond quick fixes that so often are not sustainable to move to building back better. So more than ever before, we must strengthen South-South cooperation. We must leverage it to help LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS in their fight against this pandemic. The Southern partners have the experience, the knowledge, and the means to provide targeted and effective support. They can boost regional cooperation and the sharing of cost-effective and context-specific solutions. I give you some examples. SIDS in the Pacific came together to establish the Pacific Humanitarian Pathway on COVID-19. The goal is to facilitate rapid movement of medical and humanitarian assistance. This is key in a region where geographical distance to be overcome are enormous. Take then Senegal, they piloted an economic COVID-19 testing kit and helped to train health workers from neighboring countries. Other countries such as India, Turkey, China, Cuba, and Qatar sent urgent medical aid to teams to Africa, and many others in the global south also help each other. As far as OHR LLS is concerned, we have tried to rally global support for LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS as part of our advocacy role. We have done so by organizing a series of workshops and high-level dialogues with multilateral development banks, UN agencies, development partners, both from the North and the South. We keep repeating that a cohesive stimulus package in support of the swift recovery of the vulnerable groups of countries is needed now. OHR LLS collaborates with all our UN partners to provide a platform to build solidarity, mobilize resources, foster peer learning, and promote exchange of best practice through South-South and triangular cooperation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we merely have a decade of action left to turn the 2030 agenda from words to impact. This also applies to achieving the ambitions of the Paris Agreement. For the LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS, this will only happen through renewed global commitment and enhanced partnerships. South-South and triangular cooperation are imperative if we want an inclusive and sustainable recovery and way forward for the LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS. In just so many short and long-term aspects ranging from providing medical supplies, affordable vaccines, comprehensive debt relief to investment in technological know-how, resilient infrastructure, ICTs, to all important capacity building, South-South and triangular cooperation will be more than ever indispensable and vital. This year, and in just 2 weeks' time, we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. It was out of years and years of human suffering, with millions and millions of lives lost, people left with nothing and starving, that the United Nations was envisioned. Now it is our turn to vision the future we want, so that the Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights can be enjoyed by all. COVID-19 is both a threat and an opportunity. It is now our opportunity to seize this threat by working together to steer recovery towards a more equitable, inclusive, and sustainable future for all. Let us rise to this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Undersecretary, for your words and also for highlighting the plight and the challenges for the countries for which you advocate and fight. Now it's my honor to start the speakers list. And the first speaker I would like to invite is His Excellency Mohamed Fatih Ahmed Edris, the permanent representative of Egypt, who will deliver remarks on behalf of the African group and also on national capacity from Egypt. Ambassador, the floor is yours for up to 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Executive Director, and our thanks to the PGA and all high-level speakers who participated in the inauguration of this important event. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure to deliver this statement on behalf of the African Group at this important occasion of the United Nations Day of South-South Cooperation. The African Group aligns itself with the statement delivered by Guyana on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. The group extends its thanks to the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation for organizing this important high-level event to celebrate South-South cooperation as an important component of international cooperation for sustainable development. The African Group has expressed its support to the second high-level UN conference on South-South cooperation, BAPA+40, held in Buenos Aires, Argentina, from 20 to 22nd March 2019, and its outcome document. Both have given significant momentum to South-South cooperation as an important enabler for achieving Africa's 2063 agenda and 2030 agenda in the African continent. The group emphasizes that South-South cooperation complements and does not substitute North-South cooperation, which remains the main channel for international cooperation for development. As an expression of solidarity that promotes cooperation based on the principle of equality, South-South cooperation continues to play a vital role in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. Even though the crisis has hit hard all countries and regions of the world, countries of the South maintain solidarity with each other as a genuine manifestation of their solidarity for mutual development. The international community should do more in supporting the efforts of African countries in response to the health crisis caused by the pandemic and its social and economic fallout. The pandemic has reversed so many SDGs gains in the continent, and the international cooperation is a vital tool for the economic and social recovery of so many African countries. In this regard, the group echoes the call of the Secretary General that this global crisis requires a global response, and no country will be able to face this crisis alone. The international community should also focus its action on supporting the most in need. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the AU Agenda 2063 emphasizes the value of strategic partnership to further the process of development of Africa. Moreover, the AU offers a unique framework for South-South cooperation that can be further enhanced by strengthening ties of cooperation and partnerships among the countries of the continent for shared and inclusive prosperity. African countries have demonstrated their capacity to innovate and share homegrown development solutions that promote regional solidarity and continental self-reliance. The wealth of knowledge and experiences accumulated by the African countries should be recognized and scaled up for the benefit of the development of the continent. While recognizing the work done by the Director of the UN Office of South-South Cooperation as he retires, the group would like to emphasize the importance of the principle of geographical rotation of the Office of Director amongst Asia, Latin America, and Africa, being the main regions of the Global South. The African Group looks forward to the upcoming 20th session of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation that should be an occasion to further review the recommendations of the BAPA+40 conference. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, here ends the statement I had the honor to deliver on behalf of the African Group. And after fully aligning with the statement of the African Group, allow me to say very brief remarks in Egypt's national capacity. Over the years, Egypt has taken a strong lead in South-South cooperation through its special funds for technical cooperation with other regions, from humanitarian aid through medical assistance to joint projects such as joint farms. The Egyptian Agency of Partnership for Development continues to provide short and long-term experts for sisterly African countries, in addition to tailored capacity building programs covering a variety of sectors including health, agriculture, education, energy, and law enforcement. On enhancing South-South trade relations, Egypt has concluded a number of free trade agreements with countries from the Global South. This was achieved in the context of the COMESA FTA agreement. Almost 22 African countries, the Pan-Arab FTA, 16 Arab countries, and the Mercosur FTA, 7 Latin American countries. Finally, I am delighted to report that the mega infrastructure projects being implemented in Egypt in recent years are envisaged to support not only South-South cooperation, but also South-North cooperation by way of facilitating easier access for African countries, European markets through Egyptian ports and logistical facilities and transportation networks. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for the statements of the Africa Group and also the national capacity statements from Egypt. Now it is my pleasure to ask the participation of Ambassador His Excellency Enrique Austria Manalo, Permanent Representative of the Philippines, to make his remarks on behalf of the Middle Income Countries Group in the United Nations. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Director, for giving me the floor. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the like-minded group of countries, supporters of middle-income countries, composed of Armenia, Belarus, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Jamaica, Mexico, Panama, and of course my own country, the Philippines. Our group joins the United Nations in celebrating South-South cooperation, an important milestone that highlights the valuable contributions of the South in the global efforts to achieve sustainable development. We thank the UN Office for South-South Cooperation for organizing this event and for its valuable work on South-South cooperation, including its active support in lending assistance to its partners in the Global South in response to the pandemic. Our group reaffirms that South-South cooperation is a manifestation of solidarity amongst the peoples of the South. Solidarity contributes to the national well-being, their national and collective self-reliance, and the attainment of internationally agreed development goals, including the Sustainable Development Goals according to national priorities and plans. We recall that 42 years ago, in 1978, the United Nations convened the first conference on technical cooperation among developing countries, which led to the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. This was followed through by two high-level conferences in 2009 and 2010 in Nairobi and in Buenos Aires, respectively. South-South cooperation has evolved significantly over the past decades and remains ever more important today as the international community continues to face pre-existing as well as the new emerging challenges, particularly those brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. And these require strong commitments and reflective and collective efforts in a global strategy towards the achievement of sustainable development. We recall the 2020 Secretary General's report on the QCPR and welcome the enumeration of steps that the UN is taking to strengthen its work in the area of South-South cooperation, including in the development of a system-wide strategy on South-South and triangular cooperation, which is expected to put into action a coordinated, coherent approach for a system-wide South-South cooperation policy and program at the request and with the ownership and leadership wielded by the countries. We also welcome in this regard the Secretary General's call for the UN development system to evolve its development cooperation with middle-income countries in all their diversity. Mr. Chairman, we underscore the solidarity of middle-income countries with other developing countries reflected through the financial, technical, technology transfer, and capacity building support provided by middle-income countries. International cooperation remains a powerful force for complementing middle-income countries' efforts to mobilize public resources domestically to achieve sustainable development. Increased active participation of middle-income countries in international cooperation initiatives and in the implementation of the BAPA plus 40 outcome document has a multiplying effect that can benefit all developing countries, especially during the current crisis. Our group underlines that economic growth in and of itself is not equivalent to advancements of sustainable development and does not reflect the realities in most of our countries. Understanding the role of South-South cooperation requires new approaches to the way we measure progress in sustainable development. Beyond the concern that access to concessional finance is reduced as countries' incomes grow, middle-income countries continue to face particular challenges related to aid for trade, job creation, diversification and transformation of their economies, and access to international markets. So we strongly advocate that at all levels of per capita income, developing countries continue to face serious challenges, including obstacles in relation to poverty eradication, inequality, external debt, and environmental vulnerabilities. Even high-income countries face some of these aforementioned challenges. So in this regard, international support for implementing effective and targeted technical assistance and capacity building in middle-income countries to support national plans to respond to and recover better from the pandemic and to continue to implement SDGs is vital. Finally, Mr. Chairman, you can count on our group's active engagement and cooperation towards our collective desire of leaving no one behind towards the achievement of the 2030 Agenda and its sustainable development goals and resilient recovery from the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your statement on behalf of the Middle Income Countries Group. Now we're going to start with the national statements. We have about 20 countries that have requested to speak, so I would like to request that the presentations be limited to no more than 3 minutes. So now I would like to invite Her Excellency Ms. Maria del Carmen Skef, Permanent Representative of Argentina, to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Director Chediek, dear Excellencies and colleagues. For Argentina, it is an honor being invited to speak in the International Day on South-South Cooperation. This year, we are encountered by an unparalleled crisis that makes more evident the need for a stronger and closer international community. Argentina is convinced that in order to contain, mitigate, and overcome the pandemic of COVID-19 and its consequences, we will need more international cooperation through a multidimensional, coordinated, and innovative action that includes all relevant stakeholders. In that regard, we would like to highlight the work of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, especially the publication of the volumes of good practices in South-South and triangular cooperation for sustainable development, to which my country has contributed, which allow us to share experiences and improve the cooperation among our countries. It is well known the commitment of Argentina with South-South cooperation. We hosted the first high-level meeting resulting in the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, and 40 years later, as a proof of a state policy, we hosted the second high-level United Nations conferences of South-South cooperation, which resulted in the adoption of Buenos Aires outcome document. In keeping our active and constructive commitment with the engagement of the South-South cooperation, it will be a privilege for Argentina to assume the presidents of the 20th session of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation Committee, which will contribute to the follow-up of the BAPA plus 40. Finally, I would like to recognize and thank Mr. Chediek, an honorable connational of mine, who since 2015 has been director of the UN Office for South-South Cooperation and envoy of the Secretary General on the top, and whose committed to the South-South cooperation has allowed us to take relevant steps. We will miss you greatly in the office, but we know that the UN will keep its commitment with the Global South, and your legacy of engaging of South-South cooperation will be well guarded. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias for your very kind words and for the commitment of my beloved Argentina to South-South cooperation. Now I would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Omar Hilale, Permanent Representative of Morocco, to take the floor. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to align this statement with the declaration made by the Guyana on behalf of G77 and China, and Egypt on behalf of the African Group. I would like to congratulate the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation for organizing this high-level commemoration in this special circumstances. We would like also to congratulate Mr. Jorge Chidiek for the effort done as the director of UNES. As he retires, Morocco would like to align itself with the call by the African Group for the respect of geographical rotation and the direction of the UNES among the regional of the South. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the 2020 UN Day for South-South Cooperation is indeed a non-usual commemoration. As the world is facing an unprecedented crisis, we need today more than ever to galvanize the spirit of solidarity, which is rooted in South-South cooperation, as a key principle to face the economic and social impacts and also to recover and build back better. 1 year after the adoption of the outcome document of the second high-level UN conference on South-South cooperation, BAPA plus 40, we have to take the opportunity to make the response to COVID pandemic as a tool to leverage the role of South-South and triangular cooperation through concrete actions for building resilience and mobilization of financial resources that would help the global South to speed up the recovery and accelerate the path toward the 2030 agenda. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, under the leadership of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, the Kingdom of Morocco has made of South-South cooperation one of the main pillars of its foreign policy by giving the African continent a privileged place. In a decade, more than 1,000 bilateral agreements and conventions have been signed and entered into force between Morocco and its African partners, and around 40 joint commissions been put in place. Several investment conventions and trade agreements with preferential tariff rates have also been signed. Guided by the vision of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, the Moroccan Agency for International Cooperation, which was created 34 years ago, plays a central role in scaling up projects and initiatives that boost partnership and promote South-South and triangular cooperation. In the area of development of human capital, Morocco has tripled over the past 5 years the number of foreign students enrolled in Moroccan public universities, a large majority of which benefit from scholarship of study. Moreover, the past year, Morocco has leveraged the role of South-South and triangular cooperation for promoting climate action at the African level. I would like to note in this regard the initiatives launched on the margin of the COP20 and the African Action Summit, namely one, the Triple S initiative, which aims to promote stability, security, and sustainability, and facing the migration caused by environmental degradation and climate change. Two, the adaptation of agriculture in Africa, AAA initiative as well. Last year, September 2019, Morocco has launched a joint initiative with Ethiopia, a coalition for sustainable energy access during the United Nations Climate Action. This initiative seeks to seek to ensure 100% access to energy in the least developed and other developing countries by 2030. This initiative embraces the core value of South-South cooperation, SSC, in addressing the energy deficit in remote areas of LDCs and ODCs. Excellencies, with the same core principle of solidarity, the Kingdom of Morocco has engaged actively in bringing the essence of South-South cooperation for ensuring an effective response to the COVID-19 pandemic. His Majesty King Mohammed VI launched an initiative by African heads of states and government aimed at establishing an operational framework to work with the African countries in the fight against the pandemic. Moreover, Morocco has sent medical aid to the African Union Commission and to 20 African countries in order to counter the COVID-19 outbreak in a new expression of intra-action solidarity. Those medical aid are manufactured in Morocco by Moroccan companies and comply with the standards with the World Health Organization. I thank you very much.
I would like to invite Mr. Vitava Sirihok, the permanent representative of the Kingdom of Thailand, to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First of all, happy UN Day for South-South cooperation to all. Thailand congratulates Buenos for organizing this event today. Today is indeed an opportunity to celebrate how far South-South cooperation has come and look at our way forward, especially in the decade of action and in this challenging time when international community needs solidarity. The BAPA Plus 40 outcome has provided us with the blueprint to advance our South-South and triangular cooperation efforts. The next session of the high-level committee on South-South cooperation, as well as the South Summit, will serve as critical mechanism to monitor and evaluate our progress, and Thailand is ready to do our part and work with all in this process. Thailand has long been a strong advocate and practitioner of South-South and triangular cooperation, and we are proud of the plethora of partnership we have fostered. We welcome the launch of the third publication on good practices in South-South and triangular cooperation today, which also features a number of our projects, including on climate resilience, technical education, empowerment of local communities, and sustainable development approach based on the sufficiency economy philosophy, our locally driven approach. We are keen to share these best practices with more interested countries. In closing, I am pleased to announce that Thailand, in collaboration with UNOS and SCAP, will co-host the 11th Global South-South Development Expo in 2021. The GSSD Expo had to be postponed from this year, given the current situation. We hope that the situation will be alleviated by then, as we look forward to welcoming you to Thailand. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Also, thank you for the partnership with Thailand that seconds 2 diplomats every year to our office based in Bangkok. So we really count on the support and to have a successful expo there in Bangkok next year. So now I would like to invite His Excellency Ambassador Ronaldo Costafilho, Permanent Representative of Brazil, to take the floor. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. For me, it is a pleasure to engage in this high-level virtual discussion in celebration of the United Nations Day for South-South Cooperation. We meet at a historical crossroads. We are facing and collectively responding to the greatest worldwide challenge in decades. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused major setbacks to the well-being of our societies and threatens to hinder the path of development our countries need to walk on. And as we must recognize that the national governments have been at the forefront of the response to the pandemic, which has severely hit developing countries, we must also underline the opportunities for exchanging good practices, knowledge, and technical expertise through South-South cooperation to mitigate the profound effects of the pandemic. Brazil has been a long-time supporter of cooperation among developing countries. The Brazilian Cooperation Agency, ABC, has been coordinating Brazil's technical and humanitarian cooperation for over 3 decades and has delivered projects in over 100 countries. In the multilateral arena, we are glad to share with India and South Africa a partnership in the IBSA Fund established with the support of UNOSCC to assist countries in fighting poverty and hunger. Let me highlight some key forward-looking aspects we deem important to consider at this special event. It is of utmost importance that we reassess the implementation of the BAPA Plus 40 outcome document. We believe that the next meeting of the high-level committee in December must focus on the mechanisms that must be in place to fully reach the ambitions of BAPA Plus 40. There are warnings that resources for official development assistance might become scarce in coming years. While we encourage traditional donors to honor their financial commitments, we should also take this moment to further expand South-South cooperation as an effective cooperation modality with potentially high impact on local communities. At the 75th session of the General Assembly, we will discuss the next cycle of the QCPR. It is the duty of developing countries to shape the new policy review to better capture and mainstream South-South and triangular cooperation into the United Nations Development System. The launch of this year's edition of the publication, Good Practices in South-South and Triangular Cooperation for Sustainable Development, is a concrete statement of the reach and scope of South-South cooperation and a reason to be proud of what we, developing countries, have achieved. Over 200 selected good practices spread out over 35 countries with a collaboration of 24 United Nations entities and other partners. We congratulate the UNOSCC for this report and for its steady commitment to promoting South-South and triangular cooperation. We would also like to thank UNDP for hosting the office and for being a leader of this cooperation modality in the UN development system. Finally, and to conclude, a final word to convey Brazil's deep appreciation for the passionate support Mr. Jorge Chediak has given to South-South cooperation as Director of UNOSCC. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your kind words and your the very deep commitment of Brazil to South-South cooperation, of which I am a personal witness. Now I would like to invite His Excellency Gady Solau Urdon, the permanent representative of Palau, to take the floor.
Thank you so much. It's me, Olai, and I'm from Palau. Her, not his. Excellency, early and good evening from Palau. It's actually 1 a.m. here. But I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to join you to say happy South-South Day on this hybrid new normal. I wanted to join in less than 3 minutes to say we're one of the smallest countries in the developing world, but we so much appreciate the South-South cooperation during COVID-19. Because in the next few weeks, you will hear from us that because of the South-South cooperation we have with India, we will be unveiling the first ever COVID-free leaders physical meeting in a venue that the government of India, through South-South cooperation and through your leadership, really have given us. I'm not going to read any prepared statement because there is no prepared statement that I could say about COVID-19. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your tenure as a director of UNOSSE. And I want to say, no matter the challenges for small island countries like us, we struggle, but it's countries that was in the South-South, like India, that really help us at the end. That I wanted to say, I'm up at 1 a.m. and I'm saying, thank you so much and happy South-South Day. Don't read from your prepared statement. Tell us what it is that is good, because COVID-19 has come to show us that you can have plans and you can prepare statements, but no amount of that will ever amount to the quality of the physical connection that we will have. So yes, happy South-South Day. Thank you so much, Director. And I wish you all the best in your next adventure. And thank you so much to India, because at the end of the day, you all know who your friends are. South-South, yes. Triangular, yes. Multilateral, that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's for the quality and health of the people. And I would also like to give recognition to the United Nations Office of Project Services, UNOPS, together with your office, that we are now going to be able to have the health dispensary for our country, and also the COVID-19 testing capacity to be able to ensure that if we open our borders, even in 2 months' time or towards the end of the year, that we will be able to be doing that. And of course, to the IPSA, India, Brazil, South Africa, thank you so much, because the education seems to come to a halt, but because of your South-South cooperation, we're going to be able to revitalize our education. And just to say that today is really in the midst of all the COVID-19 and all the uncertainty, that all the more we need South-South cooperation. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for all you partners, developing countries, South-South, UNOPS, for all the partnerships. And we really, really look forward to ensuring that this will be the new normal. It'll be the South-South cooperation that'll make the difference after we build back better for COVID-19. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. My apologies for the introduction, but also thank you for staying so late to join the day. Actually, for you, it's closer to the actual day of South-South cooperation, so we really appreciate your message and your very kind words. Now it is my pleasure to invite Her Excellency Ms. Griselda Araceli Gonzalez Lopez, the permanent representative of El Salvador, to make her statement.
Thank you, Mr. Director. And I will do something different as Olai. Thank you, Olai, for staying up so late, but I will read a statement. So first of all, we welcome the convening of this meeting and to the briefers for their messages. We align ourselves to the G77 plus China statement, and we fully align ourselves to the statement delivered by the permanent representative of the Philippines on behalf of the Middle Income Countries Group. We echo what was mentioned by Mr. Jorge Chedix on the importance of better demonstrate how South-South cooperation is making a difference in the world. Therefore, the compilation of good practices can serve for this purpose. In this sense, let me thank the United Nations Office on South-South Cooperation for the publication of this important report. It has been very enriching to hear good practices on how South-South cooperation is working, and it's helping us, helping out the people and making indeed a difference for those who needed it the most. El Salvador recognizes South-South cooperation as an important tool that provides a great amount of add value to the national efforts in achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its goals. This year, As many others have mentioned, this has been very challenging, as the negative effects from the COVID-19 pandemic have been felt all over the world. However, the solidarity and partnership of many countries from the Global South has been present and growing. South-South cooperation has empowered developing countries in many areas that are not usually prioritized by traditional donors. So, such elements have proven vital to the socio-economic recovery from the pandemic. And the richness of cooperation among developing countries relies on the fact that it not often includes the exchange of knowledge amongst peers, where partners benefit from each other's experiences in addressing similar challenges and objectives, while striving to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. However, it is our understanding and expectation that this modality of cooperation cannot replace the importance of official development assistance and other concessional financing. Thus, it should continue to remain as a complement and not a substitute for such efforts. We recognize that South-South cooperation can benefit from practices found in North-South cooperation, such as improved measurements capabilities for tracking results. And at the same time, we believe that North-South cooperation can also be improved by experiences originating from the Global South. For example, technology transfer initiatives and the fact that South-South cooperation is demand-driven through solidarity without creating conditionality measures and arbitrary classification of countries. El Salvador will continue to be a strong partner through South-South cooperation, both as a recipient and a contributor, working alongside many countries to promote sustainable development and resilient recovery from the pandemic, plus the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And finally, I would like to express our gratitude to Mr. Jorge Chediek for his work and strong leadership. Muchas gracias. I thank you.
Muchas gracias to you, Madam Ambassador, for your kind words and also for the strong engagement of El Salvador in South-South cooperation. Now it is my pleasure to invite Shenuka Duereni Senewirata, the permanent representative of Sri Lanka, to take the floor. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Very much, Mr. Director. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the initiative of the UN Office of the South-South Cooperation to organize this meeting is much appreciated. Sri Lanka aligns with the statement delivered by the chair of the Group of 77 in China. As we commemorate the 42nd anniversary of the adoption of the BAPA this year, the world is regrettably facing unimaginable devastation and suffering from the COVID-19 pandemic, which has mutated from health to economic, humanitarian, and social crises. Excellencies, our hard-won development goals are well under threat of reversal due to the pandemic, thereby exacerbating the pre-existing vulnerabilities of the South. Global inequalities in the areas of the digital divide, trade, and gaps in the access to education and healthcare facilities, and increasing vulnerability to external shocks have now been exposed with the onset of the pandemic. In this context, it is pivotal to explore partnerships to overcome these challenges through technological transfer, technical assistance, negotiations on equal status, and sharing of lessons learned, expertise, and skills. While South-South cooperation can make an important contribution initially to this end, it would need to be complemented by North-South cooperation in order to derive the best. As we have reached the decade of action, the world warrants urgent action by stakeholders at all levels to mitigate the health, economic, and social consequences arising from the pandemic and formulate strategies to move ahead. Time and again, South-South cooperation has offered notable solutions to our shared development challenges. As such, it has a crucial role to play in the current context, driven by the spirit of solidarity of the South. However, it is important to underline that South-South cooperation is not a substitute for official development assistance or replace the need for responsibilities of the Global North, which are crucial for financing for development. Triangular cooperation also adds value to South-South cooperation by enabling developing countries to widen the source and access more resources, expertise, and capacities. Sri Lanka firmly believes in the potential of South-South cooperation in deriving our development and resilience to face the challenges ahead. My country has successfully curtailed the spread of the virus by means of contact tracing and cluster treatment, thereby limiting the number of deaths only to 12 and positive cases of just over 3,000 in the entire island, resulting from universal healthcare access to all citizens. Sri Lanka stands ready to share our best practices of the mitigating efforts, if required, as a means of cooperation within the South. Sri Lanka reaffirms its commitment to the implementation of the BAPA Plus 40 outcome document, which also facilitates regional integration through triangular cooperation for collective actions in overcoming our common challenges in strategizing for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Such inclusive partnerships in the Global South are a significant instrument to help improve the mutually beneficial cooperation that has been an important aspect of Sri Lanka's development initiatives. In this context, permit me to recall Sri Lanka's 3-year project of Triangular South cooperation initiated last year to promote sustainable energy solutions focused on biogas and solar technologies. Further, at the regional level, the leaders of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation have sought to contain the pandemic through a collective response, including the establishment of a fund with voluntary contributions. As we work collectively to recover better, it is imperative to do so stronger, cleaner, greener, and in a more resilient manner. In this context, UNOSSC needs to facilitate cooperation and partnerships with the countries and incorporate environmental aspects in their responses. To this end, Sri Lanka is pleased to share its experience on mangrove conservation that promotes economic prosperity in coastal communities such as small fishing villages, fostering sustainable livelihoods that are environmentally resilient and sequestering carbon. Excellencies, in conclusion, while acknowledging the valuable work of the UNOSSC led by the Secretary General's Envoy on South-South cooperation, Sri Lanka calls upon the United Nations Development System to maximize its efforts in assisting South-South and triangular cooperation for the developing countries at their request. This could be in a manner to build human and institutional capacities needed to formulate and implement national development policies, strategies, and programs which would facilitate to build back better. We need to continue our collective voice and energies for the betterment of the South. Happy UN Day for South-South cooperation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador, for your kind words and also for sharing some of the experiences of Sri Lanka. Now I would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Jagdish Dharamchand Kunjul, the permanent representative of Mauritius, to take the floor. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Director. I'm very happy to say a few words on this occasion, marking the United Nations Day for South-South Cooperation. I would like to align myself with the statements that have been made by the Ambassador of Egypt on behalf of the African Group and the Ambassador of Jamaica on behalf of G77. Today's special event provides an opportunity to reflect on the vital role of international solidarity among peoples and countries of the South in the attainment of internationally agreed development goals. During the past few months, many countries of the Global South have been demonstrating effective responses to contain the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic and mitigate its impact. We have also seen true South-South cooperation in action. My own country has benefited from it in the form of medical personnel, equipment, and supplies, for which we are extremely grateful. We are yet to address the impact which the pandemic continues to have on our economies as small island developing states. More intensive cooperation among countries of the South is required, and through the exchange of good practices, it will be possible to learn from one another's mistakes and successes. While we all try to find a new balance in this new reality, we will continue to rely on the assistance of our partner countries, regional and international organizations for the achievement of sustainable development goals, as well as advancing our national development objectives. Mauritius has been pleased to contribute some of its experiences to the third volume of Good Practices in South-South and Triangular Cooperation for Sustainable Development, compiled by the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation in partnership with members and UN agencies. The following areas are the ones where we have contributed. One, containing the spread of communicable diseases under SDG 3, utilizing renewable energy to promote social inclusion under SDG 7, improving the deployment of broadband infrastructure to ensure that everyone has access to the internet, SDG 9, and promoting reef restoration and sustainable fisheries to enhance economic growth under SDG 14. Detailed account of each project is available in the publication. It might be useful for the South-South Cooperation Office to monitor and disseminate progress in these areas for the benefit of other South-South countries. I take this opportunity to commend the UN Office for South-South Cooperation for this initiative, which provides member states a platform to showcase and share the efforts of countries to accelerate the progress towards the attainment of SDGs. Let me conclude by placing on record my country's appreciation for the work that you, Mr. Director, have been doing during your tenure as head of the South-South Cooperation Office, and we want to wish you well as you proceed on your retirement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your presentation and also for your kind words. Now it is my pleasure to invite His Excellency Mr. Syed Mohammed Hasrin Aidid, the Permanent Representative of Malaysia. Mr. Ambassador, the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you for organizing this important event. My delegation wishes to align ourselves with the G77 statement delivered by the representative of Guyana. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, South-South cooperation is an important component of international cooperation. It remains as valid and relevant today as when they were first enshrined in the Buenos Aires Plan of Action 42 years ago. In fact, it is more important than ever as the international community struggles to overcome the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have heard how the current global crisis has pushed us further away from achieving the 2030 agenda and its goals. The pandemic has impacted not only our public health system, but also affecting the economy and social institutions of our country. For Malaysia, South-South cooperation is an enabler for exchanges and sharing of knowledge, best practices and resources among developing countries and other stakeholders on a multitude of issues. Hence, we continue to believe that South-South cooperation offers a unique pathway to accelerate progress that leaves no one behind. The urgent need for solutions to COVID-19 has also opened a window of opportunity for South-South cooperation initiatives in health and related areas. For instance, in our experience, we are using locally developed digital technology to curb the spread of the pandemic and subsequently reduce the number of positive COVID-19 cases in Malaysia. In our common battle against COVID-19, Malaysia believes that solidarity among the international community is crucial, particularly in research and development of a lasting cure, especially among countries of the Global South. No country should be left out in this respect or confined to substandard treatment as the testing ground for COVID-19 vaccine trials, but in reality have no access or means to procure the vaccine later. In this regard, we are concerned with the trend by some countries in vaccine hoarding, as it would hamper collective solidarity towards equitable access and harms efforts to halt the pandemic. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the second high-level UN Conference on South-South Cooperation in 2019, we call for the strengthening of South-South trade cooperation. For Malaysia, trade and investment is the most significant form of South-South cooperation, notably as trade has always been recognized as an indispensable tool for economic growth, development, and for bringing societies out of poverty. We recognize the exponential increase in trade between developing countries in the last decade. South-South trade increased from US dollar 0.6 trillion in 1995 to US dollar 4 trillion in 2016, making up almost 29% of global trade. This trend is a powerful reminder of the opportunity and capacity that exists within the South, especially as we are formulating ways to build back better from the pandemic impacts. On this important anniversary, let us reaffirm our commitment to this invaluable means of achieving sustainable development and improving the lives of billions of people in the global South and beyond. Malaysia stands ready to work with other countries consistent with our national capability, including through the Malaysia Technical Cooperation Program, MTCP, in supporting practical and shared solutions to the challenges faced by developing countries in battling the adverse effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now it is my pleasure to invite His Excellency Mr. José Luis Fialho Rocha, Permanent Representative of Cape Verde, to take the floor.
Muito obrigado, Senhor Diretor. Thank you, Mr. Director, and for organizing this event. Greetings and thanks to observe the protocol and my wishes for a happy South-South Day. I align with the G77 and the African Group statements. It is up to our collective will and multilateral efforts to make of South-South cooperation a key element to achieve the 2030 Agenda and other related agendas, as it strengthens cooperation among developing countries and can also take advantage of South-South trade and investment. The Buenos Aires Action Plan, generated by the Second United Nations High-Level Conference on South-South Cooperation, has become fundamental enabler for South-South cooperation, and we must take advantage of the provisions therein. It's worth noting that in the context of the global health crisis resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been interesting partnerships in the scope of South-South cooperation, particularly between African countries, which demonstrates that in combination with triangular cooperation, South-South cooperation is relevant by supporting measures to preserve health, mitigate socioeconomic effects, and prepare for the post-pandemic. Small island developing states can benefit from an enhanced South-South cooperation. Cabo Verde has gained some experience and lessons learned in carrying out for decades exchange, especially with trilateral financing from partners from North and South alike and international organizations, with other African countries and with Portuguese-speaking countries and small island developing states. I'd like to thank you for launching the good practice report also in Portuguese. Thank you very much for that. Our strategic plan for development in Cabo Verde also moved towards a more relevant and strong role for South-South cooperation. In line with Addis Ababa Action Agenda, South-South cooperation is recognized as a full-fledged resource within the scope of financing our development. In 2019, we set actions at elaboration and implementation of the South-South cooperation strategy in Cabo Verde, namely the holding of a workshop on South-South and triangular cooperation and mapping the South-South initiatives involving Cabo Verde. We were planned to organize the 2020 First International High-Level Conference on South-South Triangular Cooperation in the capital city of Praia, but we postponed it due to the COVID impacts. But when we are going to resume the organization of this conference, we'd like to invite all of you to visit Cabo Verde in that context. Let me conclude just by highlighting the following. South-South cooperation enshrines the spirit of solidarity by which developing countries can learn from each other and support solutions for their capacity building and their sustainable development. South-South cooperation captures the political importance of collective interchange that culminates in the adoption of important multilateral documents related to development. In addition, triangular cooperation can benefit and improve South-South cooperation by enhancing ways and means that would otherwise be in default. Finally, South-South cooperation, however, should not be a substitute of other forms of cooperation. Rather, it is a complement when adequately combined with other opportunities and partnership at the country level. I thank you very much for your attention.
Muito obrigado, Senhor Embaixador. Thank you very much, Mr.
Obrigado.
Ambassador. Now it is my pleasure to give the floor to His Excellency Ambassador Riyad Mansour, Permanent Representative of the State of Palestine. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours. So we are having issues with the connectivity of Ambassador Mansour. So now we would like to proceed with His Excellency, Mr. Nagaraj Naidu Kakanur, Chargé d'Affaires Deputy Permanent Representative of India to the United Nations. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. I thank the UN Office for South-South Cooperation for organizing today's important event. I would also take this opportunity to thank Jorge for his exemplary leadership and for his friendship. On behalf of the Indian delegation, I would like to wish him well post-retirement and would like to see him do more for Global South. Today's South-South Cooperation Day is being organized at a time when the world continues to grapple with the challenge of COVID-19. But challenging times always demand extraordinary responses. The Global South should perhaps work even more closer during this pandemic and find appropriate solutions in our journey to build back better. Excellencies, India remains committed to the principles of South-South cooperation, both at the regional and global level, for mutual learning, capacity building, and progress of all developing countries. In our philosophy and our approach to developmental cooperation, we never let geography or geometry define our relationships. India's engagement with the Global South has intensified over the last few years. The India CARICOM Leaders Meeting, the India Pacific Island States Heads of State Summit, and the India-Africa Forum Summits have further strengthened the special bonding between India and fellow developing countries. India's developmental cooperation has taken myriad forms over the last 6 decades. From capacity building, annually, we extend scholarships to 15,000 students from more than 160 countries under the India Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. And we have extended developmental finance to 64 countries totaling $30.66 billion. Another modest effort of ours has been the setting up of the $150 million India-UN Development Partnership Fund, which we operate in New York from the UN Office for South-South Cooperation. The fund supports South-owned and led, demand-driven and transformative sustainable developmental projects across the developing world with a primary focus on LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS. In just about 3 years, the fund today has a portfolio of 39 projects in 41 countries. From supporting a project to get ready a convention center in Palau, to host next year's Oceans Conference, to rehabilitating hospitals in Antigua and Barbuda and Guyana, to building a school in Dominica, an information technology center of excellence in Papua New Guinea, to developing the capacity of women to stem desertification in the Khanum and the Lake Chad regions, the fund is directly impacting the lives of communities across the developing world. As has been mentioned by the PR of Brazil, the India-Brazil-South Africa Fund for the Alleviation of Poverty and Hunger, also hosted at the UN Office for South-South Cooperation, is another unique mechanism for South-South cooperation. Established in 2004, the fund is supporting initiatives in the area of food security, safe drinking water, addressing the HIV and AIDS. Since 2004, the fund has contributed close to $40 million and has undertaken about 33 projects, of which 24 have already been completed. The International Solar Alliance and the Coalition of Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, co-founded by India, are other examples of South efforts to champion the cause of affordable solutions for a greener future. Excellencies, India is at the forefront in the call for joint global action to address the COVID pandemic with the aim of assisting fellow developing countries. Over the last several months, we have already extended medical-related assistance to more than 120 countries and have pledged an additional $15 million to Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. We have also utilized our strength in the digital and information technology space to develop a learning platform to deliver courses for training healthcare personnel in developing countries to handle the COVID pandemic. Excellencies, India will continue to share its developmental experiences and technical expertise with fellow developing countries in the spirit of the world is one family. Our approach to developmental partnership will be human-centric, based on the principles of mutual respect and national ownership, with a commitment to sustainable development for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your kind words and for the strong partnership and confidence that India has in our office. Also, on Monday, we're going to have the celebration of the 3rd anniversary of the fund, so I invite all the participants here to join that commemoration. It is my pleasure now to invite Her Excellency Ms. Ana Silvia Rodriguez Abascal, Chargé d'Affaires Deputy Permanent Representative of the Republic of Cuba, to take the floor.
Thank you. My delegation aligned itself with the statement of Guyana on behalf of the G77 and China. I wish to thank the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation and its director, Mr. Jorge Chediek, for convening this very timely and highly relevant meeting to commemorate the United Nations Days for South-South Cooperation. This commemoration is a significant occasion to highlight the increasing importance of South-South cooperation for our countries and the realization of the Agenda 2030, and further mobilize the international community in its support. We acknowledge the significant work by the UN Office on South-South Cooperation in this regard. South-South cooperation is a manifestation of solidarity among peoples and countries of the South that contributes to the well-being of their population. For Cuba, South-South cooperation is one of the fundamental pillars of our international cooperation, and its strengthening is one of our main priorities. South-South cooperation is not a substitute, but rather a complement to North-South cooperation. The implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the Addis Ababa Agenda will only be possible if there are firm commitments and greater political will to mobilize additional, predictable, and on-time resources to enable developing countries to meet their development goals. International public financial flows are insufficient to cover the financing gap of developing countries. Therefore, it is required a real political will, solidarity, multilateral cooperation, social justice, and equality, if we really want to leave no country and no one behind, including the fulfillment of the right to development for all. My delegation firmly believes that South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation has and will continue to play a significant contribution in our collective endeavors towards the implementation of the 2030 Agenda as a whole, as well as in the current fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. It is precisely in this spirit of solidarity and international cooperation that Cuba, since last March, has already dispatched 46 medical brigades to 39 different countries and territories, with over 3,800 members to help within our modest capability in the global fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in the countries of the South. These Cuban health specialists add up to the already 30,000 Cuban medical personnel who were already deployed in 58 countries previous to the COVID-19 pandemic. as a long-standing commitment made by Cuba and its people to South-South cooperation. During this trying time, we have also shared some medicines developed and produced by Cuba that, according to our proven practice, have been effective in the prevention and therapy against this disease. In addition, leading medical experts and institutions from Cuba have continued systematically sharing via teleconferences and virtual seminars their best experiences, practice, and medical protocols with multiple countries from the South. Before concluding, I wanted to deeply thank the very fruitful and constructive cooperation all over this year with Mr. Jorge Chediek, Envoy of the Secretary General on the South-South Cooperation and Director of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, and I wish him the best in his upcoming retirement on September 20. The international community, developed and developing countries alike, must demonstrate more than ever our capability to work together in solidarity. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame Rodríguez Abascal. Muchas gracias personalmente y por el compromiso, also for the commitment of Cuba to South-South cooperation, of which I'm a personal witness on both sides of the ledger, both from Cuba and from countries that receive that collaboration. I would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Dai Bing, the Deputy Permanent Representative of the People's Republic of China, to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Excellencies, it's a great pleasure to celebrate the United Nations Day for South-South Cooperation. China associates itself with the statement made by Guyana on behalf of Group 77 and China. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the founding of the UN and the 22nd anniversary of the adoption of the BAPA. Developing countries have carried out South-South cooperation at bilateral, regional, and international levels, which have become important driving force in promoting poverty eradication and achieving sustainable development globally. I take this opportunity to congratulate the launch of the good practice in South-South and triangular cooperation for sustainable development, Volume 3. While we enter the decade of action, the international community is facing global challenges, including dimensional poverty, climate change, humanitarian crisis, and the impact of the COVID-19, and in particular, unilateralism and protectionism. Today's meeting, with the theme push ways towards the SDGs throughout South-South solidarity beyond COVID-19, will help that demonstrate the determination and the confidence of all parties to strengthen solidarity and cooperation. I would like to make a few comments. First, the international community should enhance experience sharing and technical exchanges in epidemic prevention and control, promote cooperation in poverty eradication, public health and infrastructure, and expand cooperation in digital economy, online healthcare and education, and other new business areas. Such efforts will effectively help developing countries address the impact of the pandemic, improve their development capabilities, and build back better. Second, the international community should maintain the leading role of the UN in implementing the 2030 agenda and fighting the pandemic. We should support the UN and its institutions to perform their duties, make use of the global, regional, and national capacities, leverage their expertise and strengths, implement responsible plans and programs, and promote South-South and triangular cooperation. Third, we need to mobilize all parties and form a joint force for development. Developed countries should fulfill their ODA commitments and strengthen North-South cooperation as a main channel. developing countries can offer mutual assistance within their ability and play the complementary role of the South-South cooperation. Private sector, research institutions, and other stakeholders are welcome to actively engage in international development cooperation. China firmly supports South-South cooperation and is committed, as always, to helping other developing countries combat the pandemic and achieve sustainable development. We have provided assistance to over 150 countries and international organizations and sent medical expert teams to 32 countries. In implementing the actions announced by my president, Mr. Xi Jinping, China will enhance support to other developing countries, participate in the implementation of the G20 debt service suspension initiative, and promote COVID-19 vaccine development and deployment, which will be made a global public good and first benefit African countries and other developing countries. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Chadwick and his service to the UN. We highly appreciate your leadership of the UNOC and in promoting global South-South cooperation, strengthening the synergy and coordination of the UN system in supporting the South-South cooperation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for the commitment of China, and also thank you for your kind words about our work. Just for clarification, we have speakers from Colombia, Indonesia, Turkey, Nicaragua, Nigeria, and WHO PAHO. And with that, we're going to close the event. I would appreciate if you can make the interventions within the limit or even shorter, as we are already a little behind the time. So now it is my pleasure to invite His Excellency Andrés José Rugeles, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Colombia. Yes, the DPR of Colombia is not available at the moment, so we will proceed with Mr. Mohamed Kurniadi Koba, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Indonesia, to take the floor.
Thank you, Excellency. Excellency, President of the General Assembly, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to be here to take part in commemorating the 42nd anniversary of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, BAPA. The global landscape has changed since the BAPA was launched 42 years ago, but BAPA has been a clear platform for the Global South in achieving the 2030 agenda. South-South cooperation is a partnership among equals to mutually support and extend solidarity in respective developmental efforts. Interaction and cooperation must remain anchored in respect for UN principles of national sovereignty, non-interference on domestic affairs, and equal rights. It is even more relevant today as the international community is facing global pandemic and its socio-economic impacts. Developing countries face bigger challenges due to their limited resources and capabilities. The Global South has demonstrated effective response in facing the pandemic and its impact. Indonesia, for our part, has conducted more than 500 programs from 1999 to 2019 with around 6,000 of participants from developing countries. We have shared some of our experience in the good practices on South-South and Triangular Cooperation for Sustainable Development launched today. South-South cooperation programs relate to poverty reduction, agriculture, disaster risk management, budgeting and planning, fiscal management, public finance, microfinance, democracy and conflict resolution, as well as law enforcement and decentralization. With the launching of Indonesian Aid last year, Indonesia stresses its unwavering commitment in promoting South-South and Triangular cooperation in line with BAPA +40. Indonesia appreciates various initiatives within the UN system to promote and strengthen the South-South cooperation. Further, Indonesia is also ready to work together on follow-up meetings on the South-South cooperation. Thank you, Excellencies.
Mr. Deputy Permanent Representative, now we have Colombia back, so please let's go back to Colombia now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I thank Mr. Jorge Chediek, envoy of the Secretary General and Director of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, and his team for organizing this important high-level event. Today, we commemorate a significant milestone, the 42nd anniversary of the 1978 adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. The current global crisis makes it difficult to have a normal commemoration. However, it gives us once again an opportunity to stand up in solidarity, recognize our achievements, and reiterate our commitment with South-South cooperation. Also, it gives countries the chance not to lose sight of the commitments made to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In this context, earlier this morning, the Colombian Presidential International Cooperation Agency, APC Colombia, joined by UNOSSC Director, multilateral cooperation agencies from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and other partners, inaugurated a two-day virtual event entitled Expanding South-South Cooperation in an Interdependent World. We are very proud to share that Colombia had contributed to the publication Good Practices in South-South and Triangular Cooperation for Sustainable Development. In this compilation, we have shared good practices that aim to promote early childhood protection, facilitate urban mobility, and improve the well-being of people with disabilities, all with the goal of reducing poverty and preventing social exclusion. Colombia will continue to share its good practices to facilitate knowledge exchanges and partnerships through UN Global Digital Platforms. In the last year, through APC Colombia, we have developed more than 100 projects on South-South cooperation with countries in Latin America, the Caribbean, Asia, and Africa. These actions reaffirm our leadership in the region as a reliable partner. Colombia would like to express today its commitment with the adoption of better practices, always driven by the demand, experiences, capabilities, and diversified cultures at the request and with the ownership exercised by countries, especially on the South-South. To conclude, I would like to convey on behalf of the government of Colombia our deepest gratitude and sympathy to Mr. Jorge Chediek for his extraordinary hard work and leadership as envoy of the Secretary General and Director of the United Nations Office of South-South Cooperation. Jorge is leaving an important legacy at the United Nations that we admire and will never be forgotten. We wish you all success in your coming future. Thank you very much, Jorge. Muchas gracias. And I commend a big applause for you.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for your really extremely kind words. And, now I would like to invite Mr. Serhat Varli, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Republic of Turkey, to take the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, I would like to start by thanking the UN Office for South-South Cooperation for convening this meeting today to commemorate the 42nd anniversary of the adoption of Buenos Aires Action Plan. We welcome the launch of the third volume of good practices in South-South and Triangular Cooperation for Sustainable Development, which showcases how we can build on our experiences in overcoming shared challenges and accelerate progress towards sustainable development through South-South and Triangular Cooperation. Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, TİKA, shared its good practices on supporting disadvantaged groups by increasing their access to nutritious food building capacities of healthcare professionals who respond to disasters and emergencies, strengthening educational capacity in the area of ICTs, and increasing tourism with our partner countries. We will continue to share our good practices through UNOSSC's South-South Galaxy in order to facilitate knowledge sharing and cooperation. Dear colleagues, with the global landscape changing dramatically since 1978, the South-South and triangular cooperation have become all the more relevant. Adapting to these new challenges and achieving 2030 agenda require collective engagement from all stakeholders in all countries. In the face of these challenges, South-South cooperation has proven to be an important element in reshaping global cooperation architecture. We welcome the leadership of the developing countries in building common agendas and taking collective action aimed at addressing their development challenges. Once mostly limited to capacity building, South-South cooperation is now being enriched by different approaches, together with diverse regional dynamics and perspectives. Strengthening institutional coordination mechanisms and capacities will leverage the potential of South-South and triangular cooperation in accelerating progress towards SDGs. This is key to help developing countries to put in place the necessary tools to provide and receive cooperation, coordinate projects and programs, as well as to ensure that development process is demand-driven. Turkey hosted the Global South-South Development Expo in 2017, which provided a platform for all development actors and stakeholders to showcase Southern development solutions, success stories, share knowledge and lessons learned, explore new avenues for collaboration, and initiate new partnership efforts. Engaging the private sector in partnerships for development is essential. We firmly believe that implementation of public-private partnership model is instrumental, not only for mobilization of financial resources, but also for increasing effectiveness and efficiency through the engagement of private sector skills and know-how on design, construction, and operation phases. To bridge the widening gap between the developed and developing countries, we need to promote the technological advancement of the countries that are left furthest behind. On her part, Turkey actively supports strengthening the science, technology, and innovation capacity of the least developed countries to facilitate their technological leapfrogging. United Nations LDC Technology Bank, which is an excellent example of South-South cooperation, has become operational. This marked the fulfillment of the first SDG target, 17.8, since the adoption of 2030 agenda. The bank is strengthening the capacity of LDCs to develop, integrate, and scale up deployment of technologies and innovations, as well as capacity to address and manage intellectual property right issues. In our efforts to implement the 2030 agenda, particular attention must be devoted to Africa and LDCs. South-South and triangular cooperation should be enhanced to strengthen African countries' strategies to promote structural economic transformation, inclusive, equitable, sustained and sustainable growth, and employment creation and social protection. Turkey's development cooperation with Africa prioritizes technical vocational capacity building with the aim of providing sustainable livelihood. Our total development and humanitarian aid to Africa in the last decade reached more than $3 billion. Turkish Development Cooperation Agency, TICA, has implemented over 400 projects in Africa. Another region Turkey has intensified cooperation with over the last decade is Latin America and the Caribbean. Since 2013, TICA realized over 130 projects in the field of education, health, water, sanitation, institutional capacity building, infrastructure, agriculture, and livestock. We will continue to work with our partners to scale up the success of the southern countries and assist others to adapt their own circumstances. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the delegation of Nicaragua would like to thank the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation for convening this high-level virtual meeting in commemoration of the United Nations Day for South-South Cooperation. We associate ourselves with the statement made by the delegation of Guyana on behalf of the G77 and China, and wish to make some particular points on this important issue in our national capacity. This meeting is being held at a time when humanity is facing the economic and social impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has accentuated poverty, hunger, and inequality. In the midst of this pandemic, it is important to promote South-South cooperation, which has always should be practiced in a supportive, complementary, and horizontal manner among our countries, and should cover issues such as the exchange of knowledge, technologies, and experiences, capacity building, and the strengthening of human and institutional resources. We celebrate the 42nd anniversary of the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action to promote and implement technical cooperation among developing countries, BAPA. We reiterate that South-South cooperation cannot substitute North-South cooperation, and that it should not be analyzed or evaluated using any of the North-South standards. South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation is essential for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and this decade of action, since it promotes multilateralism, solidarity, and cooperation, and allows to have access to technological resources, respecting sovereignty, national development plans, and social and economic policies without any type of conditions. It is necessary to consider the difficulties created by the imposition of coercive unilateral economic measures, illegal sanctions which affects South-South cooperation, and therefore our people in the struggle to eradicate poverty. For this reason, it is imperative to immediately suspend any coercive economic measure imposed unilaterally on peoples, particularly in developing countries, since these sanctions and aggressions are the greatest obstacles to the implementation of Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. We wish to thank Cuba that even in times of pandemic and suffering from a harsh criminal and illegal blockade, has sent medical brigades to other countries, including developed countries, to face COVID-19, giving us once again an immense example of the maximum and genuine expression of solidarity and cooperation. South-South solidarity should not be the justification for developed countries to continue failing to meet their commitments. In this sense, it is very important that these countries fulfill their commitments in terms of official development assistance, technology transfer, and capacity building. I wish to thank you once again, Mr. Director.
That's not well, this is the gym.
Peru is not talking.
We apologize, but we cannot connect with Mr. Ugarelli, so we would like to proceed then with Mr. Ifeanyi Samuel Nwankudu, the First Secretary of Nigeria, to take the floor.
Thank you, Director. Excellencies, Nigeria highlights a statement with that delivered by the permanent representatives of Guyana and Egypt on behalf of the Group of 77 and China and the African Group. we welcome the convening of this important commemorative event. The theme provides the opportunity to reflect on the vital role of international solidarity in supporting delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals and recovering better from the COVID-19 crisis, especially in the Global South, where COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated existing development challenges and concerns. The impact of this pandemic has been felt in the economics, revenues, household incomes, financial markets, debt profile, and national budgets of all developing countries. It has worsened the socio-political conditions of the poorest and deepened their vulnerability to external shocks. Hence, they need to strengthen international solidarity and narrow the digital divide and inequality gaps between countries in the global north and south. My delegation welcomes the launching of the Volume 3 of Good Practices in South-South and Triangular Cooperation, and note its record of over 200 ingenious sacrifices of member states, United Nations entities, and development partners. It is a proof of the validity of our belief that South-South and Triangular Cooperation has the potential to contribute to the establishment of a fair and equitable international economic order, especially when conducted in an atmosphere of trust and sincerity. It was in this context that the government of Nigeria established the Directorate of Technical Aid Corps to respond to the developmental priorities and needs of African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. The scheme has sent tens of thousands of volunteers to over 36 countries to bridge the human resource gap in the areas of education, judicial services, healthcare delivery, agriculture, engineering, and public service. Nigeria has also extended humanitarian and relief materials to several countries in need through its National Emergency Management Agency. Besides being a veritable instrument for extending support to countries in need, these schemes underscores Nigeria's conviction that South-South cooperation remains the most accurate expression of Southern solidarity and strategic cooperation for economic growth. In this era of COVID-19 pandemic, we wish to seize the opportunity to welcome the support that the UN, international financial institutions, and member states have extended towards mitigating the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic in the Global South. However, to sustain their recovery efforts, we call for consideration to be given to outright debt cancellation, enhanced liquidity reprieve, and special drawing rights for all developing countries. Furthermore, the current palliative funds and facilities from international organizations and financial institutions to developing countries should be sustained in the short and medium terms, or as dictated by unfolding circumstances. This will help countries in vulnerable situations to gradually recover from the economic slowdown occasioned by the pandemic. In concluding, Excellencies, COVID-19 is a serious challenge that requires us to act differently. There is an urgent need for international solidarity and collaboration in responding to its downside risks. Failure to do so would impede our economic development, deepen income inequality, and deplete valuable resources for financing and development priorities of developing countries. I thank you.
Thank you very much to the representative of Nigeria. Now I would like to invite Dr. Godfrey Suerev from PAHO WHO to take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. His Excellency, President of the General Assembly, and other distinguished excellencies. First of all, on behalf of the Director of the Pan American Health Organization and the Regional Office of the Americas of the World Health Organization, let me thank the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation for inviting us to be part of the celebration of the United Nations Day of South-South Cooperation through this virtual high-level event. This celebration comes at a very timely moment. As many of the esteemed participants have stated, the current pandemic threatens both the lives and livelihoods of us all. Solidarity among and within countries is key to fighting it effectively and save our economies and lives. In the region of the Americas, and particularly in the health sector, we have seen how South-South and triangular cooperation have continued to increase in magnitude and scope over the years. Cooperation among countries for health development is PAHO's approach to South-South and triangular cooperation, which derives from the resolution and policy document approved by PAHO's 52nd Directing Council. Through this, we have seen firsthand the impacts that this modality of cooperation achieves at the country level, including improving maternal and child health in the northern border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, addressing road safety in one of the leading causes of mortality in the Dominican Republic based on the experiences of Costa Rica, tackling the challenges of antimicrobial resistance by leveraging the best practices from Argentina and implementing them in the Caribbean, the strengthening of the public health labs through equipment and staff training for testing were essential to ensure that Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean were prepared to face the COVID-19 pandemic. These are just some of the examples of the initiatives we have embarked upon hand in hand with member states, and which you will also see in the UNOSCC Good Practices publication. As many of the previous speakers have referenced, the current context has jeopardized many of the hard-earned progress made not only in the health sector, but also in our economies and political institutions. In order to position ourselves better to achieve the SDGs, we, both the UN and member states, should revamp and accelerate our efforts across the board. Getting back on track will require new ways of thinking, new ways of delivering technical cooperation, new ways of developing and implementing public policy. And we believe that this is where South-South cooperation plays an even more important role in the post-COVID world. In this perspective, we will continue to work with all the UN family and the Office of South-South Cooperation to bring attention to the critical issues such as maternal and child health, the maintenance of essential health services, including immunization programs, non-communicable diseases and other communicable diseases, violence and injuries, and many other areas of health which have continued to jeopardize development notwithstanding COVID-19, and may in fact have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. We believe that there is a great opportunity for the UN agencies, funds and programs to act as interlocutors, jointly identifying the most pressing national and regional challenges and determining which of these are best served to be tackled through South-South and triangular cooperation efforts. In closing, I would like to thank all those member states who support the concept of South-South cooperation and all the team that coordinates the UN office, particularly Jorge, who we know is moving to a new phase in his life, and we wish him well. We look forward to our continued cooperation with all, and we thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. So now we have reached the end of the speakers list. And I want to finalize by thanking personally and on behalf of the team of the office for the very kind words many of you have expressed about our work. Although, as I said, we'll be leaving sometime next week and retiring from the UN at the end of the year, I leave a great team here that will continue to do good work on South-South and triangular cooperation. So we really have all the elements to build on what has been done so far, and I'm sure they will continue to support the upcoming leadership. And I want to finish on a personal note by thanking my family that had to put up with moving to 8 duty stations in 30 years. And I would not have mentioned them, but the reason I do is because most of the countries I had the honor to serve in took the floor. And I remember their excellent contributions, the great experiences we had at the personal level, and how South-South cooperations have helped them improve themselves and help others improve the rest of the world. So thanks again. And with this, I will declare the event over, the commemoration of the UN Day, but that doesn't mean that we have to not continue being very strongly engaged to get a more and better South-South cooperation to build the world we can build. Thank you very much to all the participants, the prominent members, and my colleagues for this event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for participation. Bye. Happy South South Day.